Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today we conclude journal collection number 29 by Ralph Waldo Emerson. We are up to June 7th of that year, and I believe we'll be able to get it in one go. So, with that said, I will go ahead and start. Just again for reference, the year is 1838, and Emerson is 35 years old. So, with that said, I'll go ahead and start. June 7th. I wish a church to worship in where all the people are better than I am, and not spotted souls. Nothing shows more plainly the bad state of society than the difficulty or impossibility of representing to the mind any fit church or cultus. Take care, O ye martyrs, who, like Saint Ursula and her choir, number 11,000. If all, one of you, one single soul is true, take care not to snap in petulance instead of jetting out in spouts of true flame. Reserve your fire. Keep your temper, render soft answers, bear and forbear. Do not dream of suffering for 10 years yet. Do not let the word martyrdom ever escape out of the white fence of your teeth. Be sweet and courtly and merry these many long summers and autumns yet, and husband your strength so that when an authentic inevitable crisis comes, and you are fairly driven to the wall, cornered up in your Utica, you may then at last turn fairly round on the baying dogs all steel, with all heaven in your eye, and die for love, with all heroes and angels to friend. Napoleon. Quote, In Napoleon's eyes, merit was by itself, and he recompensed it in one manner. Thus the same titles, the same decorations were awarded equally to the ecclesiastic, the soldier, the artist, the philosopher, and the man of letters. Lachesis. Napoleon. Quote, In Napoleon's eyes, merit was by itself, and he recompensed it in one manner. Thus the same titles, the same decorations, were awarded equally to the ecclesiastic, the soldier, the artist, the philosopher, and the man of letters. Lachesis. It was observed that the emperor was not fond of setting forward his own merits. That is, said he, because with me morality and generosity are not in my mouth, but in my nerves. Napoleon, like all men of genius, is greatly impersonal in his habit of thought. He sees the sublime laws and not the individual men. Men are to him but illustrations, and hence a magnanimous tolerance. I told my friend last night I could think of nothing more deeply satisfactory than to be shut up in a little schooner bound on a voyage of 3 or 4 weeks with a man, an entire stranger, of a great and regular mind, of vast resources in his nature. I would not speak to him, I would not look at him. I would eat my supper, I would pack my trunk, I would read the newspaper, I would roll in my berth. So sure should I be of him, so luxuriously should I husband my joys, that I should steadily hold back all the time, make no advances, leaving altogether to fortune, for hours, for days, for weeks, even the manner and degrees of intercourse. Yet what a proud peace would soothe the soul to know that, heads and points as we lie and welter out at sea, all etiquette impossible, all routine far out of sight, here close by me was grandeur of mind, grandeur of character. That here was element wherein all I am, and more than I am yet, could bathe and dilate. That here by me was my greater self. He is me, and I am him. Give me, not a thought, but a magazine of a man. June 8th. A good deal of character in our abused age. The rights of woman, the anti-slavery, temperance, peace, health, and money movements, female speakers, mobs and martyrs, the paradoxes, the antagonism of old and new, the anomalous church, the daring mysticism and plain prose, the uneasy relation of domestics, the struggling toward a better household arrangements, all indicate life at the heart, not yet justly organized at the surface. A man must have aunts and cousins, must buy carrots and turnips, must have barn and woodshed, must go to market and to the blacksmith's shop, must saunter and sleep and be inferior and silly. I pleased myself in seeing the pictures brought in her portfolio by Margaret Fuller. Guercino, Piranesi, Leyden, etc. It takes me long to know what to think of them, but I think I find out at last. I am quite confident in my criticism upon that infernal architecture of Piranesi, and very delicious it is to me to judge them when at last I begin to see. The difficulty consists in writing one's self before them, and arriving at a quite simple conviction that the sketch appeals to me, and coming at a state of perfect equilibrium, leaving all allowance to spontaneous criticisms. Fear to judge or haste to judge alike vitiate the insight. Many good pictures, as much knowledge of the artist and his times as can be, and perfect equilibrium of mind, are the conditions of right judgment. In this glorious summer day I have taken a turn in my woods. How gaily the wind practices his graces there, and every tree and all the woods bow with gentlest yet majestic elegance, and the pine shakes out its pollen for the benefit of the next century. There I feel the newness and prerogative of me and of today. I would say to the young scholar, permit none to invade your mind. Live with God alone. See how the Spirit does execute every presentiment in some gigantic fact. What else is Egypt, Greece, Rome? Insight comes all ways. I refuse the insinuation that there is no perfect education of the genius but by violent passion. Day and Martin seem to have deserved well of history for auguring and uttering the secret of the old age in their cosmopolitan placarding age, O call. In nature all the growth is contemporary. Man's labor in the garden is successive, but the weeds and plants swell, root and ripen all over the farm in the same instant of time. Why do we seek this lurking beauty in skies, in poems and drawings? Ah, because there we are safe. There we neither sicken nor die. I think we fly to beauty as an asylum from the terrors of finite nature. We are made immortal by this kiss, by the contemplation of beauty. Strange, strange that the door to it should thus perversely be through the prudent, the punctual, the frugal, the careful, that the adorers of beauty, musicians, painters, Byrons, Shelleys, Keatses, and such like men, should turn themselves out of doors, and out of sympathies, and out of themselves. Whilst I behold the holy lights of the June sunset, last evening or tonight, I am raised instantly out of fear and out of time, and care not for the knell of this coughing body. Strange the succession of humours that pass through this human spirit. Sometimes I am the organ of the Holy Ghost, and sometimes of a vixen petulance. I delight in our pretty country church music, and to hear that poor slip of a girl, without education, without thought, yet show this fine instinct in her singing, so that every note of her song sounds to me like an adventure and a victory in the Tonveld, and whilst all the choir besides stay fast by their leader, and the bass viol, this angel voice goes choosing, choosing, choosing on, and with the precision of genius keeps its faithful road and floods the house with melody. Goethe certainly had good thoughts on the subject of female culture. How respectful to woman and hopeful are the portraits in Wilhelm Meister, Natalia Teresa. June 10th. Night. Progress or a ladder of 4 steps. Last night at 10 I left my dreamy journal and went abroad to receive the fair inscriptions of night. The moon was making amber of the world. Every cottage pane glittered into silver. The trees were beautiful yet ominous with their gloom. The meadows sent up the rank smells of all their ferns and grasses and folded flowers into a nocturnal fragrance. The little harlot flies of the lowland sparkled in the grass and in the air. It is all music. Then we see that Martin's creation picture was true, and that the man who has seen the moon break out of clouds at night, arising, has been present, like an archangel at the creation of light and of the world, and that he who has been in love has assisted at a new and second morning, that he in whose soul art has been born has seen a greater day, and finally, where indeed there is no final, he who has through weary experience of sweet and smart in life attained to know character, and to worship that slow, secular divine product, has beheld a worthier creation, that great day of the feast. Noon. Mercury 90 degrees in the shade. Rivers of heat, yea, a circumambient sea. Welcome as truly as finer and coarser influences to this mystic, solitary, purple island that I am. I celebrate the holy hour at the church amid these fine creative deluges of light and heat which evoke so many gentle traits, gentle and bold, in man and woman. Man in summer is man intensated. See how truly the human history is written out in the faces around you. The silent assembly thus talks very loud. The old farmer, like Daniel Wood or David Buttrick, carries, as it were, palpable in his face, stone walls, rough woodlots, the meadows, and the barnyard. The old doctor is a gallipot. The bookbinder binds books in his face, and the good landlord mixes liquors, yet in motionless pantomime. Beauty, softness, piety, and love come there also in female form, and touch the heart. Vices, even, in slight degree, improve the expression. Malice and scorn add to beauty. I see eyes set too near and limited faces. Faces, I mean, of one marked but invariable expression. I wonder how such wear with the husband. They pique but must tire. I prefer universal faces, countenances of a general humane type which pique less, but to which I can always safely return home. I read plainly in these manifold persons the plain prose of life, timidity, caution, appetite, old houses, musty smells, stationery, retrograde faculties, puttering round, to borrow Pete Howe's garden phrase, in paltry routines from January to December. And I see, too, hope, and the far contributions of Europe, Palestine, and Egypt, so deep ingrained in American education, to the physiognomy of the house. If a man is self-exaggerating and does not embrace a great man with his heart and soul, expect no miracles of him. He is a seamer, and the truth is not in him. Great men again do not brag of their personal attributes, but, like Napoleon, generously belong to the connection of events. He identified himself with the new age, and owned himself the passive organ of an idea. Everett has put more stories, sentences, verses, names in amber for me than any other person. Quote, a wise limitation, end quote. Very refreshing it is to me to see Minot. He is a man of no extravagant expectations, of no hypocrisy, of no pretension. He would not have his corn eaten by worms. He picks them out and kills them. He would have his corn grow. He weeds and hoes every hill. He would keep his cow well, and he feeds and waters her. Means to ends, and George Minot forever. They say he sleeps in his field. They say he hurts his corn by too much hoeing it. June 12th. A good fruit of the day's philosophy would be some analysis of the various application of the infinite soul to aesthetics, to metaphysics, to ethics, to physics, and so show, as they may, the tendency, direction, and prospects of the present tendency, the present movement in the American mind. When I hear the projects of the philosophers and reviewers, and am constrained to note how far off some of them are from any grasp of the real value of what thoughts have already appeared to the few observers on our towers, I am quickened in the ambition to attempt an enumeration of these. The history of opinions, and any history of philosophy, fortifies my faith in the treasuries of the soul by showing me that what dogmas I had supposed were the rare and late fruit of accumulative culture, and only now possible to some recent Kant or Fichte, were the prompt improvisations of the earliest inquirers, of Parmenides, Heraclitus, and Xenophanes. Therefore leave me alone, do not teach me out of Leibnitz or Schelling, and I shall find it all myself. Ah, a fact is a great thing, the soul passed into nature. Private, accidental, confidential conversation breeds thought. Clubs produce oftener words. June 13th. Solitude is not, and society is not. Alternate them, and the good of each is seen. You can soon learn all that society can teach you for one while. After some interval, when these delights have been sucked dry, accept again the opportunities of society. The same scenes revisited shall wear a new face, shall yield a higher culture. Undulation, alternation is the condition of progress of life. Do not be an unwise churl and rail at society, nor so worldly wise as to condemn solitude, but use them as conditions. Be their master, not their slaves. Make circumstance, all circumstance, conform to the law of your mind. Be always a king, and not they, and nothing shall hurt you. To an earnest soul is always solitude. Inspiration makes solitude anywhere. Very pleasant to me were the glimpses I have got of the mind of C.S., who left us today, yet gave me only glimpses. Yet twice she engaged my cold pedantic self into a fine surprise of thought and hope. Today she would know who the geniuses were in history, and how many, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and recognized the relation of Jesus to Shakespeare, and lamented the impossibility of conversation in society. That in a dance they talked of miracles, and at concerts of spiritualism. Use society, do not serve it. Use books, do not serve them. Why should you be less than a world? I do not accept this complaint of the morbidness of this age of consciousness or introversion. I do not think there is any treachery in nature. I think the spirit will be true to itself in every emergency. This crisis or state is as natural as any state, must be foreseen, and forearmed, and forebalanced, and undoubtedly has its own checks and good fruit, though Margaret Fuller laughs at my word. Do not speak of God much. After a very little conversation on the highest nature, thought deserts us and we run into formalism. All is yet to be done. Consider that the perpetual admonition of nature to us is, the world is new, untried. Do not believe the past. I give you the universe new and unhandselled every hour. You think in your idle hours that there is literature, history, science behind you so accumulated as to exhaust thought and prescribe your own future and the future. In your sane hour you shall see that not a line has yet been written, that for all the poetry that is in the world, your first sensation on entering a wood or standing on the shore of a lake has not been chanted yet. It remains for you. So does all thought, all object, all life remain unwritten still. And yet for all this it must be owned that literature has truly told us that the cock crows in the mornings. Time is optical. In the best thought, time is no more, and always it is full of illusion. To say that life is long is tedious, is to say that it is in the constitution that we should wear out every thought, should slowly roll it all round and see it to tediousness before we can be permitted to see another. But the length of time or the prose of life accuses me. Once or twice I have been a poet, have been caught up onto a very high mountain. Why should I ever forego that privilege? When I read the North American Review or the London Quarterly, I seem to hear the snore of the muses, not their waking voice. Read and think. Study now and now garden. Go alone, then go abroad. Speculate a while, then work in the world. A sense of want and ignorance is a fine innuendo by which the great soul makes its enormous claim. Napoleon. Means to ends, thought passing into action, the absence of all that was mean and pitiful characterizes him. I admit there was the filigree and gingerbread which enter into every Frenchman except Montaigne. The far is holy, the near is economical. Go into the garden Sunday morning, and you may look across the fields to the distant woods. Monday morning you peep after weeds and bugs. Yet Sunday morning you see the near flower with like emotion as the distant hill. Health. We must envy the great spirits their great physique. Goethe and Napoleon and Humboldt and Scott, what tough bodies answered to their unweariable souls. Now is there somewhat annoying and even comic in the fact that man may not sit down in the grass to inspect the wings, antennae, etc., of his fellow creature, or yet on the stone wall in the June night to see the racing of the liquid lights and the nearing heavens because he has consumption in his side, sciatica in his shoulder, Syria in a sensation. The iron hand must have an iron arm. Alternation. The bath in the Battle of Pisa, as drawn by Michelangelo, exhibited the extremes of relaxation and strength. We like the girding belt. We like to be dissolved in liberty. When we have seen friends and talked for days until we are turned inside out, then go lie down, then lock the study door, shut the shutters, then welcome fall the imprisoning rain, dear hermitage of nature. Recollect the spirits, close up the two expanded leaves. At church, the minister reads all the notes describing the condition of sick or bereaved persons, and then patiently enumerates in his prayer all the degrees of kin, selecting and keeping each with botanical precision. It seems as if he should teach his parish rather that God is not a respecter of persons, that he is neither brother, sister, cousin, or uncle. Again, the prayer rendered such fervent thanks that the family of the good farmer who died last week, quote, were not left to the cold charities of the world, but were abundantly blessed in the present life, that I fancy the town's assessors would take a hint in their next invoice, not to say what should be the lesson to us all below. It seems as if the true preacher, if he would give a sermon on humility, would know how to go to church and read Chaucer's Griselda, and Charles said when T.'s poor neighbor complained of his driving them from gathering chips and refuse cutting out of his woodlot, that he should go to church if he were minister and read Goody Blake and Harry Gill. Elizabeth Peabody brought me yesterday Hawthorne's Footprints on the Seashore to read. I complained that there was no inside to it. Alcott and he together would make a man. The unbelief of the age is attested by the loud condemnation of trifles. Look at our silly religious papers. Let a minister wear a cane or a white hat, go to a theater or avoid a Sunday school. Let a school book with a Calvinistic sentence or a Sunday school book without one be heard of, and instantly all the old grannies squeak and gibber and do what they call sounding an alarm from Bangor to Mobile. Alike nice and squeamish is its ear. You must on no account say stink or damn. Yesterday, Elizabeth Orr's letter from Aunt Mary. It was a sort of argument for the immortality of the soul to see such a scripture. For whilst the thing certainly interests, yet is not life long enough to study out the tendency and idea which subterraneously shines, sparkles, and glows in these sibylline leaves. It is a fragment of wisdom and poetry, yet now gives me neither, only affirms that it came from these. Almost all souls intimate more of the divine than they see, and biography halts between that they were and that they suggested. This afternoon the foolishest preaching, which bayed at the moon. Go, hush, old man, whom years have taught no truth. The hardness and ignorance with which the threat that the Son of Man, when he cometh in clouds, will be ashamed of A and B, because they are not members of the conquered church, must have suggested to them, quote, be it so, then I also will be ashamed of him, Such Moabitish darkness, well typified in the perplexity about his glasses, reminded one of the squash bugs who stupid stare at you when you lift the rotten leaf of the vines. What is so beautiful as the sobbing of a child, the face all liquid grief as he tries to swallow his vexation? I feel also how rich the world is when I read Ben Jonson's Masks, or Beaumont and Fletcher, or when I go to the Athenaeum Gallery and see traits of grandeur and beauty which I am yet assured are not by the masters, and were done by I know not who. They were done by the master. June 17th. A cool, damp day, a cool evening, the first interruption we have had to the energy of the heat of the last 8 or 10 days, wherein the mercury has ranged from 70 degrees to 90 degrees. When the cool wind blows, the serene muse parts her fragrant locks and looks forth. What canst thou say, high daughter of God, to the waiting Son of Man? What canst thou teach to elevate these low relations, or to interpret them, to fill the day, to dispel the languor and dullness, and bring heaven into the house door. Ah, say it, and to me. The pages of Swedenborg, to one who does not yet penetrate to the man's thought, are as dull and stifling as a book describing the charlatanry of the Freemasons. June 18th. C.S. protests. That is a good deal. In these times you shall find a small number of persons, of whom only that can be affirmed that they protest. Yet is it as divine to say no as to say yes. You say they go too much alone. Yea, but they shun society to the end of finding society. They repudiate the false out of love of the true. Extravagance is a good token. In an extravagance there is no hope, in routine none. And who would ask that on such a rare soul as is made to see beauty and announce it, the same culture should be applied and the same social demands made as on the crowd? One beholder of beauty is as much wanted as a scribe or a seamstress, O Jack Cade. I think the scholar, the artist must go alone and ask a somewhat dainty culture. The art of writing consists in putting two things together that are unlike and that belong together like a horse and cart. Then have we somewhat far more goodly and efficient than either. Quote, may make the cheerful sure, may breeds and brings new blood, may marcheth throughout every limb, may makes the merry mood. Richard Edwards, born 1523, died 1566. Ah, my country, in thee is the reasonable hope of mankind not fulfilled. But the utmost thou hast yet produced is a puny love of beauty in Austen, in Greenough, in Bryant, in Everett, in Channing, in Irving, an imitative love of grace. Ah me, the cause is one. The diffidence of ages in the soul has crept over thee, too, America. No man here believeth in the soul of man, but only in some name or person old and departed. No lack of pretension is there. Oh no, all we be is placarded in square miles of newspapers, and the characteristic of the American in Europe is, quote, pretension, But it is fair to ask these reformers, Democrats, new churches, and transcendentalists, where is your poetry, your science, your art? Why slumbers the creative hand? I think we cannot safely argue. I think it needs a saint to dispute. But how I heard it in silent thunders one Sunday in my pew, that all nature helps him who speaks the truth. Speak the truth, and the very roots of the grass underground there move and stir to bear you witness. Speak the truth, and the innocent day loves you and serves you. June 19th. Forget the past. Be not the slave of your own past. In your prayer and your teaching cumber not yourself with solicitude, lest you contradict somewhat you have stated in this or that public place. So you worship the dull god Terminus, and not the Lord of Lords. But dare rather to quit the platform, plunge into the sublime seas, dive deep and swim far, so you shall come back with self-respect, with new power, with an advanced experience that shall explain and overlook the old. Trust your emotion. There are 3 Greek words here untranslated. Happy pilgrim of nature. Over him streamed the flying constellations. All he knew and loved, all that grew in the growing earth and radiant heavens reappeared in soft transfiguration in that wise young head, and morning and evening he blessed the world. Where he went, the trees knew him, and the earth felt him to the roots of the grass. Yet a few things sufficed. One tree was to him as a grove, the eyes of one maiden taught him all charms, and by a single wise man he knew Jesus and Plato, Shakespeare, and the angels. It will take an imaginative and philosophical writer nearly as long to write the preface to his book, a preface of a page, as the book itself, and an advertisement will pain him for a week, and then cost half a day to execute it. A young lady came here whose face was a blur and gave the eye no repose. June 21st. Have you had doubts? Have you struggled with coldness, with apathy, with self-contempt that made you pale and thin? George Fox perambulated England in his perplexity. In elegant Cambridge, have you walked a mile in perturbation of the spirit? Yet somehow you must come to the bottom of those doubts, or the human soul in its great ebbs and flows asking you for its law will call you, boy, life, authentic life, you must have, or you can teach nothing. There is more to be learned by the poor passions which have here exercised many a pale boy in the little strife for the college honors, in the incommunicable irritations of hope and fear, of success, but still more of defeat, the remorse, the repentance, the resolution that belong to conscientious youths in the false estimate they are apt to form here of duty and ambition, than there is in all the books of divinity. These trees, though not very old, if they could speak, could tell strange things. They could tell of tears, of the bright remembrance of domestic faces and virtues by young men who had just learned to wander, of homesickness, of piety that came after wine. I by no means believe in storms. Quite as much as Lord Byron, I hate scenes. I think I have not the common degree of sympathy with dark, turbid, mournful, passionate natures, but in compunction, in a keen resentment of violation, in shame for idleness, in shame at standing still, in remorse for meanness, in remorse for wounded affection, in rolling in the dust and crying, "Unclean, unclean," when we have debased ourselves to appetite or undone ourselves with injustice. I believe, I believe. I honor the retirements of men. I love the flush of hope. Cyrus Warren says that, quote, "If you do not, in hoeing corn, pull up every mite of the piper grass, it will live till it rains, and then it will grow." End quote. A church is a classification. Say rather a new mind is. Swedenborg is a new classification, as phrenology, as Benthamism, as abolitionism, as Calvinism is. And the neophytes take the same delight in subordinating everything to their new terminology that a girl does who has just learned botany. They call it Christianity. I call it consciousness. Animal magnetism peeps. If an adept should attempt to put me to sleep by the concentration of his will without my leave, I should feel unusual rights over that person's person and life. Keep away from keyholes. Day creeps after day, each full of facts, dull, strange, despised things that we cannot enough despise, call heavy, prosaic, and desert. And presently the aroused intellect finds gold and gems in one of these scorned facts, then finds that the day of facts is a rock of diamonds, that a fact is an epiphany of God, that on every fact of his life he should rear a temple of wonder, joy, and praise, that in going to eat meat, to buy or sell, to meet a friend or thwart an adversary, to communicate a piece of news or buy a book, he celebrates the arrival of an inconceivably remote purpose and law at last on the shores of being, and into the ripeness and term of nature. And because nothing chances, but all is locked and wheeled and chained in law, in these motes and dust he can read the writing of the true life and of startling sublimity. June 22nd. Splendid summer, abounding in south wind, whose fine haze makes the distant woods look twice as distant, and man and beast and bird and insect see their corn and wine grow in beauty. The low Englishman begins to idealize his life by quoting Lord A. and Sir John and my Lady B., who thus said or did to me. Bear with these little displays and little people as far-off efforts at a better good. Conjure with the great name. Who forbade you create? Fear. And who made fear? Sin. Inaction. Ignorance. What is this astounding greatness of other men that they should be as God to you? Why, it is two things. First, your littleness, which makes them seem so large, and second, your identity with them, which makes them delightful to you as the colossal portrait of yourself. If society sleeps and snores, if there is no art, no poetry, no genius, no virtue, do not say that such things cannot be, but remember in your own sorrowful life the sin that is also in theirs, namely the surrender of hope, the voluntary abdication that somewhere was covered up now in the bushes and wilderness of so many years. When you said, quote, "As others do, so will I renounce, I am sorry for it, my early visions. I must eat the good of the land and let learning and romantic expectations go until a more convenient season. Then died the man in you. Then perished the buds of art and poetry and genius. Had you stood firm, had many stood firm, O God, had all, we should no longer speak of society with cold disapproval, warning you against it, but we should see in it the half gods whose traces are not yet quite obliterated, careering in contest or in love, and the still grand remains of Greek art. Insertion from the editor. Mr. Emerson, after admitting his debt to the stimulation of thought excited by antagonism to the monotones who invaded his study, see Literary Ethics, page 184, permits himself to exclaim, but you must treat the men and women of one idea, the abolitionist, the phrenologist, the Swedenborgian, as insane persons with a continual tenderness and special reference in every remark and action to their known state, which reference presently becomes embarrassing and tedious. I am tired of fools, said once my sharp-witted aunt to me with wonderful emphasis. You admire your Etruscan vase, and with reason, but I have a cup and cover also, that pleases me well, to wit, the ocean and the sky. Saturday, June 23rd. I hate goodies. I hate goodness that preaches. Goodness that preaches undoes itself. A little electricity of virtue lurks here and there in kitchens and among the obscure, chiefly women, that flashes out occasional light and makes the existence of the thing still credible. But one had as lief curse and swear as be guilty of this odious religion that watches the beef and watches the cider in the pitcher at table, that shuts the mouth hard at any remark it cannot twist nor wrench into a sermon, and preaches as long as itself and its hearer is awake. Goodies make us very bad. We should, if the race should increase, be scarce restrained from calling for bowl and dagger. We will almost sin to spite them. Sunday, June 24th. Forever the night addresses the imagination and the interrogating soul within or behind all its functions, and now in the summer night which makes the earth more habitable the more. Strange that forever we do not exhaust the wonder and meaning of these stars, points of light merely, but still they speak and ask and warn each moment with new mind. In the garden the eye watches the flying cloud and Walden woods, but turns from the village. Poor society, what hast thou done to be the aversion of us all? The wise is not to be preached, and not to be flattered out of his position of perpetual inquiry. The young and admiring tend to make him quit his apprenticeship and sit down and build homestead, church, and state, like other householders that have renounced their right to traverse the starlit deserts of truth for the comforts of an acre, house, and barn. The goodies, on the other hand, taunt him with inefficiency, with homelessness, with having no shelter, with pride in refusing to accept the revealed word of truth. But more sacred, more grand, forever dear, speaks the holy oracle to him in the silence of the passions, and rebukes these vain babblers of puny taste and of false religion. Nothing is so shallow as dogmatism. Your soaring thought is only a point more, a station more, whence you draw angles for the survey of the illimitable field. Thou awful Father, who so slowly uncoverest my nature and hoped my curiosity and faith, I lowly strive to keep thy law, to bow no knee to the Baals, fine with what jewels, mystic with what poetry soever, but to keep erect that head which thou gavest me, erect against the solicitations, and, if it should so be, against the physical and metaphysical terrors of the universe. This it is to have immortal youth. I saw a hand whose beauty seemed to me to express hope and purity, and as that hand goes working, grasping, beckoning on, in the daily life of its owner, some of this high virtue, I think, will pass out of it. The softness and peace, the benignant humanity that hovers over our assembly when it sits down in the morning service in church, the cold gentleness of the women, the quietude of the men, are like that beautiful invention of the dew, whereby the old hard peaked earth and its old self-same productions are made new every morning, just dazzling with the latest touch of the artist's hand. Alcott has the merit of being a believer in the soul. I think he has more faith in the ideal than any man I have known. Hence his welcome influence. A wise woman said to me that he has few thoughts too few. She could not count them all. Well, books, conversation, discipline will give him more. But what were many thoughts if he had not this distinguishing faith, which is a palpable proclamation out of the deeps of nature that God yet is? With many thoughts, and without this, he would be only one more of a countless throng of lettered men. But now you cannot spare the fortification that he is. Oh, how much is supposed in every discourse! O poet, thou wert 10 times a poet if thou couldst articulate that unsaid part. It seems clear that it will be the distinction of the new age, the refusal of authority. Men will not now say, as the immigrant French noblesse on their return under Napoleon, quote, "You know we must serve somebody," but it will be the point of honor in literature and in life, and the principle in the church to imbibe God without medium. Beautiful is the veneration of men, beautiful that it should be so dear to them that they are jealous and furious if it be offended and will immolate the offender. The flames they kindle around the martyr are the far prophecy of the flames they will brave themselves when their veneration is enlightened. Our test of the true faith is, does it charm and command the soul? Another wood thought was, that since the parrot world will be swift to renounce the name of Christ in amends to its pride for having raised it so high, it behooves the lover of God to love that lover of God. June 25th. They said in the French Revolution there was a comte whose ruling passion was the fear of being guillotined. Civil life may show many men whose ruling passion is the fear of being robbed. I woke and watched one night a dull hour on hearing noises, steps below stairs, or a creaking of windows or doors. But the love of my spoons shall not again hinder me from sleep. Perhaps we have not got such a distance from Swedenborg as rightly to appreciate him, or have not read him enough, and he may be a third or a fourth great genius of the world who is to set his mark on ages and on following millions. This at least I incline to concede to him, the truth of the remark made by a woman of his church, that her intellectual power had grown by the study of his writings. June 26th. The radical tragedy of nature seems to be the distinction of more and less. How can less not feel the pain? How not feel indignation and hatred at more? Concede the literary man genius, which is a sort of stoical plenum, nullifying the comparative, and he is content. But concede him talents ever so exalted, denying his genius, and he is aggrieved. Look at men of less intellectual power than yourself, and yet able, and one feels sad and knows not well what to make of it. Almost you shun their eye. Almost you fear they will upbraid God. What should they do? Seemed to me yesterday the answer was plain, that the basis of all was divine, and that if I feel overshadowed, forestalled, and outdone by great neighbors, I can yet love, I can still receive, but I will not poorly play a parrot's or a valet's part. I will not repeat all my primary sols and weaken all I repeat. This better is a plain token that my lustrum of silence is not yet complete. Why should I intrude into the guild of workmen before I receive a sign? I will retreat into solitudes of ability and love. The drying wind under this bright sun lifts up again the heads of the grass which were bent down and lodged in yesterday's storm. Let in time as a drying wind into the seed field of today's thoughts, which are dank and warm and wet and low bent. The west wind combed out the matted and disheveled grass as it lay in the night locks on the ground. Trismegisti, Moses, Zoroaster, Pythagoras, Heraclitus, Socrates, Jesus, Confucius, St. Augustine, Giordano Bruno, Spinoza, Swedenborg, Synesius, Plotinus. Facts. The only fault in Napoleon's biography is that he was beaten at Waterloo. What can genius avail against facts, which are the genius of God? June 28th. The moon and Jupiter side by side last night stemmed the sea of clouds and plied their voyage in convoy through the sublime deep as I walked the old and dusty road. The snow and the enchantment of the moonlight make all landscapes alike, and the road that is so tedious and homely that I never take it by night is Italy or Palmyra. And these divine pleasures permitted to me of walks in the June night under moon and stars, I can put my life as a fact before me, and stand aloof from its honor and shame. This is the end of Volume 4 of the Journals of Ralph Waldo Emerson. In the next volume, Volume 5, we will take up with the year 1838, as we are only about halfway through it at June 28th. Thank you for listening.